Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deidre Garrett. I am the Director of HR Services and Organization Development here at MRA. Thank you so much for joining us for our member spotlight for our DEI conference for 2021. Today, I'm joined by Angela Adams, who is the Chief Communications and Diversity Officer at Goodwill Industries of Southeastern Wisconsin and Metropolitan Chicago. Angela has a lot of years of experience, almost 20 years of experience supporting the community in many of their DEI efforts, and we're excited to have her here today. So thank you so much for joining us, Angela.
Thank you for having me, Deirdre.
So I wanted to get started today just to learn more about how Goodwill decided to begin their DEI journey.
I think it's important to note that equity has been a longstanding value of Goodwill since its founding, serving immigrant populations, and that's very relevant still today. Our Goodwill is also a thought leader and known for supporting and serving individuals with disabilities, which is a very important part of the DEI conversation. So to your question, I think the conversation we're talking about today is around how did Goodwill become much more intentional about addressing the conversation we're having across the nation and the globe today, and that's about supporting individuals who are experiencing racial inequities. And, obviously the health crisis and the social injustice that we're all seeing and witnessing has escalated the work and elevated the work across many organizations, and Goodwill is no different. But DEI, our language is much more intentional these days, but diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a longstanding value of the organization.
I love that you use the word intentional, which I think is really important when we talk about DEI. So you mentioned this past year's events. How has that affected your organization's DEI plans and your strategies that you've been putting in place?
Yeah, well, again, we've become much more intentional and focused on what is our responsibility and ownership in addressing this. We have employees who experience racial inequities. We are a workforce development organization, and so the job seekers that seek our services are people who are experiencing racial inequities and experiencing some of the social determinants and the challenges that the various systems do not allow people to survive and really thrive, right? And then the communities where we operate our businesses also are experiencing the impacts of what's happened over the past year. And so we are having very strategic conversations around what do we own, what is our responsibility, and what is the business and mission case for DEI as it relates to our organization.
That's awesome. And it sounds like you guys were able to, I don't want to say easily shift your focus, but you were able to really highlight the equitable work that you were doing in the community and really push that forward. What are you doing, I guess, right now in this space to create an inclusive environment at Goodwill?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that the transition has been easy. I think every organization is really wrestling with, the spectrum of DEI is broad. And so how do we focus and go deeper where it makes sense for our respective organization? So we're in the process of exploring that from a strategic standpoint. We're looking at every aspect of our organization. Where do we integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion? So those conversations are taking place. And then also, we have been very intentional to say, how do we increase our learning? We're really on a learning journey right now. We're not in a position, I've heard this said before, and so I'll share it here. We're not in a position to write a book about DEI, but we certainly are in a position to read a book. And that's what we're doing. So Jackie Hallberg, our CEO, has asked every single leader at Goodwill to take a personal learning journey and to develop our cultural competence so that we can better lead across difference. And that's the work that I'm leading on her behalf.
I am so excited to hear that because I always think there's importance in cultivating a DEI competency, and it's kind of left out of the conversation when we talk about leadership and even talent development.
Yes.
So speaking of leaders, what has been the pivotal role that your executive leaders have kind of played in this DEI strategy for your organization?
Well, absolutely. You know, our executives have been critical in sponsoring and championing the work, primarily because they're leading operations and departments where either employees that they're leading or the operations are being impacted. So it's important to learn and to sponsor the work. We have an essential workforce, and if they need to travel to get to work during a pandemic, and making sure that they are safe and that they have the information that they need so that our workforce can show up and our operations are not disrupted. So again, it's taking care of our people and also taking care of our business operations. So from the executive standpoint, we have three guiding principles that help us to make decisions, and we're focused on the sustainability of our organization, the safety of our employees, and equity in all decisions that we make.
That's awesome. So speaking of your employee population, how has your organization's focus on DEI helped you around engagement, attraction, retention, just for talent?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think Goodwill is no different, that we are striving to be an employer of choice, to have the best talent. And that includes fostering a culture of inclusion and having not only a diverse workforce, but a workforce that diverse talent can feel included. And so our work to engage employees, all employees around DEI began long before we got to this point in formalizing our strategy. And that was one of the departments that I lead is community relations. And our focus has really been for the past 5 years to foster inclusion through social engagement. And so we have employees who are engaged in our community relations councils across our 2-state, 23-county territory, engaging in volunteerism and supporting the community where individuals have barriers to work. And really addressing that through a volunteer standpoint, which helps us to share our mission and our brand across all the communities and really engage with other individuals who might be interested in coming to work for Goodwill or just being an ambassador for our mission and the work that we do.
That's a great way to create, as I like to say, ambassadors within your organization. To really tell more people about their great experience within their organization, but how you support them in their volunteerism efforts. So that's awesome. What would you say that you and other leaders in your organization have learned along the way?
Yeah, I think the most important aspect to our personal learning journey is to take the time to do it. There is no good time to start. There's no easy way to start. I would say, don't spend time, trying to plan to make it perfect. Just get started. Engage employees, create a safe space for dialogue and for conversation, and, put some framework and some structure around that so that employees can understand what the ask is and what their responsibility is. Our leadership team very much understands that leading across difference is a leadership competency. And so really being clear about the business case, and in our case, our mission case for DEI, and communicating that up, down, and across the organization has been the opportunity for everybody to share in that vision.
And what you said there is inspiring. I think the mission case and the business case. I think many organizations can learn from that, but also maybe at this point where they are also trying to begin their DEI journey. So I like that you said it does not have to be perfect. We
That's
really
right.
appreciate you taking time to speak with us today, and just sharing information about and background about how Goodwill has really started its DEI journey, engaged leaders, and really been committed to really pushing this forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.